The internet has changed the lives of everyone on the planet, keeping us connected and helping us achieve our dreams in ways that past generations never imagined. Join Christian and Faruk as they interview other startup founders, investors, tech employees, and amazing people who have changed their lives in unbelievable ways simply by using the internet. Find out how you can do it too right now on Thank God for Internet.
Hey, what's up? We're on another episode of Thank God for Internet. And I'm excited to talk to you guys today because we just wrapped up a great interview. Sarah Beth was a rock star, definitely a rock star.
Yeah, I mean, she was just, very charismatic and very passionate about her startup. And I think for our very first interview, there's no secret, this is our first one. That was, I think she was pretty good. I was surprised,
No, for sure. Definitely pleasantly surprised. Like, I didn't know what to expect there. And I think this goes back to what I was saying. I did a little bit of research, right? Like, I checked out the website, but I really wanted to get to know her on the camera rather than going in and knowing what I was going to ask,
Yeah. I was more like, I think I was talking to you about it before, and I was like, we should probably get a little bit prepared, I think it gets more interesting. But you were like, nah, screw it, let's just do it.
I like a good cop, bad cop thing, man. Like, I like if you want to be prepared, like I don't want to stop you from being prepared, and I think that could even lend to the dynamic of the show. Like, as we kind of figure out what's working out, if you have the stats, the facts, like you have the homework and the research, and then let me just be like this. So tell me, let me.
Yeah. I'm not necessarily a stats guy, it's just more like kind of knowing what I'm going to talk about, right?
No, I'm super. I'll go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just like saying this was a kind of industry I'm not familiar with, honestly. And this was kind of new. I learned a lot on that call, actually.
No, for sure. I think that's one of the cool things about having a podcast, and especially talking to the caliber of guests we're talking to, is the audience is going to take away what they take away from this for sure. But you and I can learn. Like, I learned a lot from Sarah Beth.
Yeah, I mean, that's like plus, people learn, we learn. I mean, what's there to lose?
Nah, for sure. And then she was super dope, right? So if you haven't watched the episode, go watch it. Great founder, great story. This woman literally overcame cancer, beat cancer as a child, launched a company during a pandemic with the goal of helping other people, right? So not just the entrepreneur 101, right? Like, we're going to make $1 gajillion, but she's genuinely serving people with a real product. And it's legit when old people use it.
Yeah, I know about old people. I'm in Florida, so yeah.
Old people heaven.
There's not that many of, actually. I know a lot of people think Florida very like geriatric, but it's not that bad. There's a lot of young people as well, There's certain areas.
Yeah, I didn't think about Florida's getting old until the conversation like nationally started getting into it. Cause like Florida for me represented, I'm not 30 yet, right? So Florida for me always represented spring break.
Yeah.
Spring break, Florida, Miami, ball out, pop bottles, Florida.
Fort Lauderdale is a spring break city, really.
Right, right.
That's what
Panama or Destin, Panama. These are all the times I went to Florida, and it was probably swimsuits and beaches. Maybe a drink or two. No judgment.
Yeah, I'm past that stage, but yeah, I remember those days.
No, I think everybody's past that stage in the corona. Like, I remember we thought that the pandemic was only going to last through spring break, and I don't think we've figured out what app is going to replace that yet.
Well, actually, during the corona, you can see it, you can find on TV, there was a spring break happening in Florida, and there was a bunch of young people partying everywhere.
I do remember that. Remember that. No, that was happening everywhere, because I saw that on the beaches in Alabama too.
Yeah. We're Florida. We always have crazy people here.
Dude, I can't even say it's Florida anymore. Like, now it just seems like everybody, man. Like, the thing about the internet, for good or bad, you get to just see everybody. Everybody gets to share their thoughts. So we get to reach out to more brilliant people, right? Like, more genius people. But the not so genius people are getting to talk too, right? And, so the internet is just a wild, wild place right now.
Yeah, for sure. And it's and I'm excited. That's what this podcast is all about. I'm excited to see different perspectives from different characters and different professions.
Yep.
But they all have kind of very very like there's a lot of things in common that they all have, and that's obviously internet. I mean, who doesn't have internet in common now?
Right. Now, that's what I'm excited about this podcast for, is because it seems like we're trying to tie a lot of these threads together. But I mean, Sarah Beth, for example, said she didn't have a MySpace page, right? She was not even a digital native, so that's not what I was expecting on episode.
I thought she did have it. I thought she did.
She snuck. She had a black market MySpace page. Ooh.
Oh.
Ooh.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Don't start with MySpace. Those are the days.
No, like I said, I used to sell like custom MySpace pages back in the day. So we would, I remember marquee tags. I thought I was a shit when I could like hide your top 8 or hide your online now, or put some Lil Wayne lyrics up and some backgrounds and do, the flashing text like that. That used to blow my mind back then.
Well, that was kind of always like, that was another interesting thing with MySpace. It became almost a competition. Like you don't know when you visit somebody's profile, it's always different. People people would hire people, like, as you mentioned, to redesign their pages. But it was always like, it's an adventure every time you go see it. Right now, you go on Twitter or Facebook, it's the same screen.
Dude, I had a whole MySpace. Now that I think about it, I had a whole MySpace operation. I had like 4 music accounts, and I would like upload music, and I would like power the music or the song profile song for different people and stuff like that. Like MySpace, man, what happened?
Yeah, I mean, I did the same thing because at that time I was like an amateur, techno music producer.
Nice.
And I used to have like, I would feature my music on it and listen to how many people are like, the music scene was big with MySpace.
Oh, for sure. I think they had their own record label.
Did they?
Yeah, I think so, because like I think Dane Cook came out of MySpace, and I think that he was as a comedian, and I think that they I remember Tila Tequila came out that MySpace era.
Yeah, you're right.
But I think they had like a legitimate record label.
And it's so like crazy what happened with MySpace. Like they went from like the top social network, like it felt overnight. Boom.
I mean, but it didn't feel overnight, because I was a hyper user, and I remember it started to get weird when it was a lot of spam messages on the bulletins, or like everybody was like, it got really spammy, like really like.
Facebook happened. That's what happened.
Well, Facebook happened too. I remember somebody actually told me about MySpace. Facebook, because I was in the library. I remember this one. Shout out to Chaz. I remember Chaz at Duncanville High School, but he saw me on MySpace, was like, hey, you need to check out Facebook. I created a Facebook in high school and was like, this shit is dumb. You can't even change your background. You don't even have a profile song. And then lo and behold, 2 years later, I hit college, and the Facebook thing got serious.
Yeah, I resisted Facebook also for a while. I was like sold on MySpace, right? Yeah. And then I don't know, at some point just converted, and that's it. I've never heard of MySpace again.
Do you think that Facebook could have the same kind of decline that MySpace had?
Of course, anything can.
Yep.
I mean, it's funny, like when Facebook was just coming up and MySpace was still kind of king during that time. I worked for another startup, if you want to call it a startup. It had like $75 million investment, and it was trying to compete against Facebook and MySpace. It was called Molly. not a reference to drug. It was really Molly.
Was it in Florida? Was it? Please tell me this was in Florida.
It was in Florida. Yeah,
man. Of course, Molly was in Florida.
But this one, the name stood for money and living. So it's MO and LI, right? Molly. Okay. And we were it was fully funded. It was like, we had like, I don't know, about maybe 100 people. Yeah. I was like I hired there as a developer, and then I started managing people there. And we had like multiple data centers and things like that. It was, we're trying to go all in. And then crash happened. The 2000.
The crash.
And then all the investors.
This is like 2001.
No, this is 2008.
Oh, 2008 crash. Okay.
2008 crash.
Oh, okay.
This is like kind of, Facebook was still not that big.
Yep.
It was getting bigger, right? And MySpace was still kind of there, but pretty much dying, right? And we were trying, our competitor was really Facebook. And, but yeah, it failed miserably as soon as that crash happened.
Why it failed? Like
all the investors pulled out. I mean, we were burning like a million or two a month, right? And
Jesus.
so imagine that, like burning that. And I don't know, we had maybe like 1 million users at that time, maybe.
Right.
I can't remember exactly. But we had
Now,
some
1 million
innovative.
users used to be like the shit. Like if you had 1 million users, especially in pre 2010, like you were a legitimate entity.
Yeah, I might be lying, but I remember it was a huge. This is like, it's kind of cloudy in my head right now,
Mhm.
and I'm sure it's maybe some people who are part of
I mean, if
that.
they raised $75 million, like obviously they weren't just like, you know, two kids in the garage anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Though I mean, it was. It's not two kids in the garage, but it felt like two kids in the garage.
Nah, for sure. Now that's one of the things I've seen is I think the startup culture is a separate culture than enterprise culture, right? Like I'm in both, right? Like I do the enterprise thing and I do the startup thing. And then even if some of these startups get bigger, right? Like you still want to have the basketball hoop on the back of the door, right? Like you still want to have, you know, some beers in the fridge, or it just still feels kind of wild or chaotic sometimes.
Yeah.
If you're funded and you have a family and you're still grinding out 60,000,000 hours a week, you still try to keep that scrappy feeling.
I mean, this just shows you the timing is everything in
Oh,
this
for
business. Sure. Like everything could be going smooth, and then something happened, just like Corona. How many businesses has Corona destroyed?
No,
I mean,
for sure. And then just to be the optimist, right? Like I even think about in the other sense, timing being everything. How many businesses flourished because of the pandemic, right? So like,
absolutely, yeah.
It's wild to see. I don't think anybody would have, 12 months ago thought that Zoom would have been the big that it is. But
they wouldn't be as big now. They definitely can thank Corona for this.
My grandmother is asking me if I'm working from home now, right? Like before, I would have to explain to my family what I did. Like they would just see me in a corner with a laptop, right? And not know what I was doing or what kind of work I was working on. But they would just be like, Chris is always playing games on that computer. I was like, no, grandmother, this is big business in these clicks and types here, But now she's working from home is so mainstream that you're not just a technologist who uses the internet or, who's doing Zoom calls or Skype calls. Cause before I would only use Skype if I was outsourcing some work overseas.
Yeah. Oh, Skype. Yeah. What happened with that? That thing is also nowhere. I mean,
Microsoft owns them. I actually use Skype every day because, it's embedded in Microsoft Teams.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, the only time I remember is using it on Xbox because they migrated to Xbox. That was cool too.
Dude, Microsoft is an interesting business because at one point in time, like they were the big bad wolf.
No, they became a good guy, surprisingly.
Yeah,
it's like it's weird.
Yeah,
they're more good guys now than Google.
I mean, it's a new executive, right? Satya Nadella, is that his name?
Yeah. No, I mean, they get more into the. I'm sure probably I'll get some hate mail for this, but from Google people and also from look, my opinions are my own, nothing really.
No, for sure. No, I mean, but it's interesting, right? Like the tech landscape definitely feels different now. It's 2020 as we record this than it did in 2010. It felt like all tech could do no wrong. Everybody in tech was trying to change the world and make it a better place. And obviously had some .com millionaires and that was a thing. But from the Silicon Valley ethos, it felt like Google was a good company, felt like Facebook was a good company trying to connect the world. Amazon, like these felt like good companies. And now Google just got sued by the United States for being not good. And that's weird because, it's interesting just to see how quickly people's moods can shift around the space because, don't be evil used to be the thing.
Yeah, I mean, like I don't really blame Google or any of them. It's when you're that big of a company and you're that big of a corporation, it's like it has its own momentum. You can't really control it. Even the CEOs of those companies, they don't have full control. There is boards and everything else.
Yep.
And so it's like
they're really good at like separating teams. Like it does feel like if you're a project manager, you're on your own island. Because one of the things that I heard a lot of people upset with Google on particularly was that they were robbing page views from the publishers, right? So now the answers are in the search rather than you having to click. And then, they're not paying a vig to the content writers. They're not. So like, Yelp could have been seen as getting done wrong. by Google in the same way that Zynga could be seen as getting done wrong by Facebook.
Yeah, I mean, and there,
But
and then
who's
top,
the project manager, right? The CEO might not have even made that decision. It could have just been a project manager on a team trying to hit his metrics, trying to like, how can I, hit my numbers so I can get my, XYZ, and no malice or no bad intent could have possibly been there. But, you represent the entire company, and Google represents, for most people, the entire internet.
yeah, I think it's like, even though it's, of course, people like to label things, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's black or white, but things are always a lot more complicated than they seem, right? If you really want to get to the truth, or like, do you want to speak the truth, or do you really just want to like go with the crowd and
Right,
what's popular and just label left and right?
What
Like
sounds
kind of what
good.
happened with like Quibi, right?
Yeah, Quibi's interesting to me. But
know,
that's a skill, or that's an example of, you just can't rest the process, right? Like, you just gotta go. You have to eat shit for a little while as a startup, because you don't even know what you are. Like, we're running Extra Founder. We've got hundreds of users, but we don't know really what we have at scale yet. Same with this podcast. Like, we're still trying to figure out what we're doing. And then you can start trying to scale it up, and then you can try to repeat it, but you got to test the market out, man. You got to get some legs underneath you.
Yeah, I have, my opinion is like, I'm one of those, I'm probably going to get, again, more hate mail for this, is like, who believe in more.
They love you. They love you.
It's luck. I mean, look, I think skill is almost default, you have to have, but there's so many skilled people out there that the only thing that starts, like, if everybody is top notch, and there's, let's say, millions of users in this world that are top notch in their professions, then what is going to play? What's the next thing? Is positioning, it's the environment where you started, luck, right? Honestly, it's if you have multiple people who are racing, at the same, quality of speed, then luck is going to play a lot in that.
No, for sure. No, I think Quibi is an example of, I think the startup mindset that goes back to that culture we were saying. I often think of startups as its own separate skill, because to go from 0 to 1, right, to make something out of nothing is tremendously difficult, right? Like, if you've had to go without, if you're born into poverty, right? Like, if you've had to figure something out, how to get something started, that's a completely different mindset or a different skill set than taking it from 10 to 100, right? So that's when a lot of big companies, you'll see the same thing. Is like, they just lack that pop, right? Like, obviously you can be skilled at, running a $1 billion company, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean you know how to qualify to get this idea launched up over the weekend and get your first 100 users, right? Like, that's a completely different skill set. And most times, the rock stars translate, like, go from 0 to 100 and also manage $1 billion company. But this was the history of the Valley, right? Like, you would see some founders who would get a company to, a certain scale, and then the VCs would oust that founder and put in a professional executive.
And and I don't know, it could be good and bad. I see it like rarely ever being good. When from what I know is, I can't foresee, like, because you're gonna lose a lot of that innovation. You're gonna lose a lot of that charm about that company. I'm not, there's obviously points where, especially if the founder feels like, look, I've reached my level, right? So then I can understand it. And that happens too. You go like, listen, this is beyond my skill. But
today there are more resources for founders than ever before. Like, right, like, you see a lot of these founder boot camps, you see a lot of these accelerators. Even what we're trying to do is help people get their legs from under them as they scale up, right? But that is different than going backwards, right? Like, if I'm sure that whoever we were just praising Satya Nadella, right? Like, I'm sure that it takes a different skill set to run Microsoft than it does to, have the next hot fintech startup, right? Like, that's the thing now, right?
For sure. Yeah, I mean, it's like it's all about strategy at that point. There's very little,
I've seen a lot of shitty code in startups, and it just seems like the code gets cleaner in enterprise, because, like, if a dev doesn't know he's just like, look, I'm just finna refactor some code. Like, I'm just come through and that's not really like, if you're IBM, I knew a guy who ran a macro to do his job. So, IBM is not necessarily trying to get to their next user or necessarily trying to launch this new feature as much as they're kind of in troubleshooting mode, or they're kind of in like bug fixing mode, or like sales mode, more so than like trying to change the game with the new feature.
Yeah,
I'm
I
telling you,
don't know.
entrepreneurs, dude, I'm a highly sought after commodity, right? Being able to be in both of those spaces. Well, the term is now entrepreneur, right? Like if you can have the resources of a corporate entity behind you, but also know how to be very, very cheap, frugal, lean, right? The lean startup methodology, right? Is not the same as that waterfall methodology, or like, we're going to spend 6 months to launch a prototype, and we're going to have 5 developers, 2 designers, a copywriter, a project manager. And it's like, nah, dude, like 2 kids can make this shit happen in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean but again, like it doesn't. That definitely doesn't scale all the way.
Of course not. Of course not. Of course not.
You have to at some point, it's not like a linear scaling that just happens. I see
Right.
more like startups or anything else in life is like steps, right? You have to collect your energy to make that one step, then you have to conserve the energy, and if you don't have any stairs, you got to build that stair up and then make a step, right? So it's like there's a build up until you reach a certain threshold, and then you make the next step, and then build up, and
that's if it's the right thing to build, right? Like we are.
You might be going with that stair to nowhere.
Yeah. And then you're like, okay, well, this didn't work. Like people like this side of the feature or this side of the product, but not this side. So let's kill what doesn't work, and you're feeling it out. Like you're literally trying shit. Like you are professionally trying shit.
You might then want to build like a little cheap tower first to see where you're at before you start building like a really well laid out stairs.
Yep. Nah, but just different skill set, man. Sarah Beth talked about it in her interview. She's in the healthcare space, so I think that space is the distance between the startups and the enterprise players in the medical field is way different than
Well, she's still in a not that regulated one, even though she mentioned she would like it to be more regulated, which is kind of interesting.
I was gonna say, like, you don't hear that a lot with founders.
Well, because she feels like she has something very authentic, and that's
she has the plug. Like she has a top doctor. She has proprietary, like she is fresh off the boat, right? Like no middleman, straight plug. So, and then she's brilliant. Like I get a lot of resilience from her. She overcame some stuff. She's charismatic. She's going to be okay.
No, I'm sure. More worried about us. No, I'm
joking. Right.
I mean, she already kind of, she raised, I think half raised or something like that in round already. So that's already
she was
impressive.
Saying she planned on getting the next round in a safe note. So, I mean, she's sophisticated in how the financing works as well. So
yeah. And then she had a major headache from that raise. And every founder I've ever talked to or heard that raised money is always like, this is the worst thing ever.
No, for sure. I mean, and by the way, there's a kind of a pandemic happening. So that might make it a little harder too,
No.
But nah, it's super interesting. I want to know how much she raised, but I didn't want to ask, but I wanted to know.
Well, she might not be,
exactly
be able to disclose.
Let's not get the lawyers involved.
Yeah, it's not like somebody you disclose it on our show. Nobody's gonna hear about it.
Right. Just you guys, just you listeners, and you're special. So don't listen to Faruk. You're special. You're listening.
Yeah. Never listen to me. Just take that note right now.
No. Don't not listen. Don't not listen. How about that one? It's interesting just to see this space, man. Like I think we could talk about these companies all day long, which is why Extra Founder is so interesting to me, because obviously we're building a product, we're looking to scale. We're trying to grow up as a startup as well, but for me it's interesting because we get to interface with so many of these companies, right? Like we get to talk to investors even when we're not raising capital. We get to talk to founders even if we're not trying to do an M&A deal or trying to merge or anything. And then so for me, just the nerd in me just has more data points to look at and gets to nerd out around how do we continue to develop the ecosystem? How is a medical startup going to be completely different than a social network, which is going to be completely different than, Casper, who's selling mattresses online, right? So it's so many principles that are uniquely attached to each business, that it showed me that there is more than one way to skin a cat for sure. And there are definitely principles that are in place, but these principles are in place until they're broken. Not that they can't be broken, but they're just in place until they're broken, because, you know, you were talking about having data centers. Ew, AWS, please. But yeah, it's a time. Like, it's gonna change. Like, even if a rule does work, we don't know if it's gonna work, for a year, 5 years, 10 years, or if it's just a hot thing. Did you get lucky and it worked, and now you're just an evangelist to this solution?
Yeah, I think luck plays, like I'm always going to say, it plays a big factor in a lot of things.
For sure.
It's like I think I'm posted somewhere on Twitter too about this. Is like, it's, would you rather like start from the from the start line, or would you start somewhere from the middle of the track, right? Where do you want to start, right? If you start from the middle of the track, you're gonna have a higher chance finishing better than the guy that started behind you, right?
I could be, obviously I'm biased around this, right? But as a Black man, the narrative that I've been telling myself is that I've always been aware that, right, the deck may or may not be stacked against me, right? So I was raised to think that you started behind the starting line, right? And you have to work twice as much to get half as much. And I was like, okay, knowing me, I want twice as much, right? So like, I'm going to have to work every hour, every minute, every second, right? Like, I don't expect for someone to just take a meeting because I want them to, right? So yeah. I think that grit is kind of what we're talking about around startups, right? Like, if you're a startup, it takes a certain like ferociousness almost to birth a new product into the marketplace, versus if you haven't had to deal with the adversity, you may not be prepared to get punched in the face when COVID happens, or when a market crashes, or if any world-changing event happens that
Absolutely. I think it's not like a one way. It's not a 0 or 1 situation. For sure, right? For sure. There's if you start so behind, right, then no matter how much grit you have, you're just never gonna make it.
No, that's fair. No, I was born in America, so let me be very grateful.
Exactly. Like, if you start somewhere in some third world country, right, under some dictatorship, let's say North Korea,
I have all my fingers and toes.
Exactly. So you first have to escape North Korea, right? Good luck starting a business in North Korea. That's never going to happen. So you're going to escape North Korea. Then wherever you escape, depend if you make it alive, right? You have to start that business somewhere else. So you're already starting under without at the disadvantage is what I want to say. Is because you don't have college. I mean, like, I'll speak to myself. Like, I came out of the war. Right. I came here when I was 17. Mm-hmm. So I didn't finish high school here. I was too old to get high school. Right. So I was left at this no man situation. Right, so what do you do? So it's like, it's already like somebody like me or any kid that comes in like that is like, what do you do at that point? You don't have connections. Sure. So things get much harder. I'm not saying it's not possible to make it and do it, and you can, but you have a lot more work to make up than somebody who's already like some wealthy kid that went to private school, right? Is going to go to private college. I mean, the doors are like, you have to really work really hard to screw your chances. Honestly.
No, I think it's like, so let's say if the goal is to get to 10, if you're born at 5, it's easy to go from 5 to 6 to 7 to 8, right? Yeah, exactly. But it might be hard to get to 9 to 10 because, I've heard a lot of investors talk about, when they're writing checks, they'll look for refugee founders, right? Or they'll look for founders who escaped from a war, or who escaped from a regime, or who swam across something, right? Like, if you're by definition self-selecting that you are tougher than average, that you have the grit and the determination. So starting a company is nothing. Like, if you can get out of a war, then you can start a company. But if you've never been told no before, not well.
Investors take note.
Right. No, for sure.
I don't know. They haven't found me yet. Where are they?
No. We're look. It's funny that we're doing this podcast, but I've always looked at myself in my professional space as the market's best kept secret, right? So yeah, man. Just just because someone hasn't dug up gold does not mean it is not underground shining, my boy.
Yeah, but there's a lot of pattern matching. You're gonna hear that a lot from
Yep.
in the startup world, and so that has also it works against people also like me maybe and you, right? Is that they're looking for you going into this Ivy school. They're looking for you having these privileges because it's a clear sign. These other things, it might be much more difficult to use as a pattern, right? And until somebody breaks it, right? And that's kind of cool thing that's happening right now in kind of venture and investing world. There's a lot of VCs and a lot of investors who are looking for these underestimated, underprivileged, startups and founders.
I'd love to have Arlen Hamilton on the podcast. She runs the fund. I think it's Backstage Capital.
Yeah.
She's writing a book around it. She's sharing her experience. So she's not just doing the work, but she's like sharing her thoughts around some of that pattern matching. Because again, like it's no fault to it, right? Like if you have a formula that works for you,
exactly,
then it's going to work for you, right? Like if two guys come from Stanford, and then one guy has a computer science degree and the other guy has an MBA, and you know they got 1,000 users, is you write the check. Like like that's a no-brainer, right? Like
or maybe they thought it's working. Maybe it's always been just, and that's another thing you're gonna hear from the other side, saying that, hey, it never really worked. It was just really random, right? And there's two sides to this, really, and I don't know which one is. I don't have that much data to.
I think, and this is just pure philosophy, right? I think that genius is evenly distributed, right? I think that opportunity is not, right? So there's someone who was a genius in a third world country who could not be Albert Einstein because what they were focused on was bringing irrigation to their family, right? What they were focused on was, creating electricity for so these and excuse my ignorance for not, being privy to what's happening in these spaces, but I think that I don't look to take away from the Stanford alum who are and it's working, right? Like all these things for the Harvard graduates. But I think that there are several opportunities that are being missed by not focusing on minority founders, people of color, women founders, because, you might only be scratching 10% of the potential, right? Which is why the portfolio theory happens, right? Like you're hoping 10% of your portfolio makes up 2, 3, 5x of your whole, your fund. But, you could be mixing out on a Latin American founder or someone who's in South America or somebody who's in Africa or somebody who's in Asia, who is also going to make the next big thing, whether you back them or not. So
I agree. And it's good to see that it's actually, it's probably still not there, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But there's still, I could see the signs of breaking through, right?
Yep.
And it's more public than ever before. And so, but it still has ways more to work to be done on it.
No, for sure. I think that's part of the human experience. Like, I think the internet has fast tracked a lot of this, because before, how we have had these conversations, right? Like you might have had these in your home or you might have read a book about it, but now it's happening on social media. It's happening on not just television, right? Like, you don't have a producer who's saying, hey, the audience isn't ready for that. I'm forced to look at some of these graphic images on my phone because they're being sent to me, right?
Yeah.
But it's having the conversation, I think, is important, and that's kind of where we are as humanity. Because let's be real here, like when is it going to be finished? Like when is it like, damn, like every problem has been solved, there's nothing else, we're always going to be trying to eke forward to something. And I try to be optimistic in the fact that yesterday was Thursday. Throwback Thursday, I posted a picture of Martin Luther King on my social network, and then with the realization that my grandfather was a whole adult man when Martin Luther King was being arrested as a nonviolent, so it's not like these things are thousands and thousands of years away, but I also don't think that these solutions are thousands and thousands of years away either.
Yeah, I mean, I can do a whole new segment on that philosophy, right? Mm-hmm. Where are we going to go and where we've been and how that all plays out. Where does it all end?
I think that's what we're doing here, right? Like, even what is the future of the internet? What is the future of internet culture? What is the future of, are we going to be cyberpunk, right? Like, is this...
I think my theory is that the end result is Matrix, right? If we're not already in one, or are we going to be in it? It's just plugging in is the ultimate goal. And I don't mean goal, but it's the end of the line.
Right. Like, so more Ready Player One.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're not going to even know. It's like from the birth, you're going to be plugged some chip or something. And that's it. And whether you're walking around or virtually or in real life, you're going to have that. You're going to be part
But
of
then
that.
even by then, right? Like you're gonna have people who are like, "Fuck you, you're Unix," you know. So like it's gonna be we're tribal by design for you know.
Well, we can redesign ourselves. There's a gene somewhere for that, most likely, and you can just take that out, and then we're going to be a different species at that point.
Well, they say if we were made in the image of God, then we are God, right?
We're going to re-image ourselves.
Right, and that's crazy.
Version 2.0, you know.
Now I fund that. I'll put some money behind the guy starting.
Who knows? I mean, at that point, you know, there's a point where we're not humans anymore, and I don't know when that's going to be. You know, and look, think about it. Like we started from monkeys or some kind of cousin of it, right? And do we consider ourselves monkeys? Nope. You know, so same's going to be the future humanity. They're not going to consider themselves human.
Yeah. No, I mean, I had that conversation a lot because I had surgery when I was younger. So I had some metal pieces in my leg, right? Like I am blind. For those of you who are not looking, I have on glasses. I even try to get them clear so you can see them. But this is essentially a vision augmentation, right? So I was asked to have LASIK surgery when I was in high school. I declined it because I do think glasses look cool. But what happens if they're like, hey, what we can do is we can have you better than 20/20 vision. We can give you a robo eye, right? Like we can have you, think of everyone who has a prosthetic arm or leg right now. They're essentially cyborgs, right? Like we are in this space and we don't think of them as such, but I'm curious as to not just the technological advancements, what are going to happen, but what I'm more interested in, how are the humans, socially, how are we going to react to it? Because nobody thinks you're weird if you have glasses on now. But if you were in the Salem witch trial, this witch has glasses.
I mean, it's hard to know because you think you're always going to progress forward. But if you look at the history, it's sometimes you can make, a step forward and 2 steps back. Right. So it's never straight line. It's usually like zigzagging, and you can see that through the history. You go forward and you go back and reset and then burn everything down, rebuild. And it's who knows where you're going to end up, honestly. Most likely none of us can foresee. Like if you ever go look at the projections, what like in 60s, what they thought it's going to be right now, like 20.
For sure.
It's so funny.
I love looking at old renditions of the future, right? Like that's why cyberpunk is so interesting to me, because it started out as cyberpunk 2020, right? And then here we are in 2020, no flying cars, no, what's that quote? We thought we were going to get flying cars. Instead, we got 140 characters.
Well, it's a good trade-off.
Hey, yeah, right. I'm not super upset at that, but super interesting to see what they thought futurism was in the 50s, 60s, 70s.
I'll tell you, like that. If somebody asked me what would be a perfect job, if there was a job for that where I could just sit back and predict the future, right? And somebody would pay me for it, that would be my dream job.
I mean, one could make the argument that that's what an entrepreneur does at a small scale, and at a larger scale, what a institutional investor does in the venture space. One of the reasons, and for the listeners who are listening to this, you may not know this. Before I joined Faruk, I was actually exploring the route of trying to become an angel investor, right? So working on accreditation pieces, working on how do I brand myself in that space, because it was interesting for me to say, hey, can I raise some capital? Not from the friends who are necessarily real estate friends, but could I raise capital from my network? And could I have conversations all day long with people smarter than me, and have them convince me that what they're going to build is the future, right? And then so that's why I kind of have some empathy for the investor community, because A, you've only got a limited amount of capital, right? You can't say yes to everybody. And then B, the investment that you make is almost you putting your money where your mouth is, for saying that I think the future is going to be Peloton. I think the future is going to be people with home offices instead of skyscrapers, right? Like it has to fit in your investment thesis. So, that's like what I'm working for.
Yeah, it's like investors are like, I don't know, this is probably going to be way offline, but it's like Nostradamus was like a gambler, right? And it was a big time gambler visiting casinos all day long, but he could predict the future.
Yep.
Really.
Yep. Nah, I mean, dude, I probably spend way too much time thinking about what the future of the internet looks like. Because I think about, for me, my generation, and you too, actually more than you, but I was born in 1991. So I remember a time not having internet, but very briefly. So I still feel like I'm a digital native, but I remember that life moved on without the internet, right? Anybody born in 2000 can't fathom life without the internet. And anybody born in the 70s, 80s is like, I mean, you may or may not be a digital native. You, for example, are an engineer. So obviously the internet means a lot more to you than, somebody who's a librarian or somebody who's a bodybuilder, right? Born in the 80s, 70s.
But I remember clearly, without obviously, and I was born in 78, and, I don't know how old I was, maybe 17, 20, when the internet was started to picking up, really somewhere between that time. And plus I came, from a country during the war where, even though there was like little signs of internet everywhere else, we were still way behind. I mean, it was a war zone. We're still running on BBS. I don't know if any of you guys remember that.
I remember BBS. I could nerd out about the history of the internet forever and ever.
Yeah, people are like, what is BBS?
Right.
Yeah, it's so like, that's like, it was like a first internet if you think about it, right?
No, for sure.
Before.
It's a network.
Yeah, exactly. It was a
network. That's
networking.
why, I think that this goes back to being limited to your thesis, right? Like if I'm a venture capitalist in Silicon Valley and all my deal flow is coming from Palo Alto, then I see what I see. But there are a lot of investors who missed out on the WhatsApp deal because I don't need WhatsApp in America. Like I can just send you an iMessage, but like believe it or not, Americans, there are countries outside of America. Right. So my first interaction with WhatsApp actually was a friend of mine who just came back from Miami. And he was saying that all the Puerto Ricans or all the Brazilians weren't asking for phone numbers. Like they were asking like, what's your WhatsApp? And let's stay in touch that way. And then he just noticed that everybody who came to America from another country preferred that more than Facebook. But I never heard of it. And I was like, nobody cares about WhatsApp. Fast forward a year, 2 years later, what was it, $19 billion?
Yeah.
I would have been wrong on that one.
Yeah, that's just, and there's another one. What was that? Besides WhatsApp, also big
Kik.
internet. Wasn't Kik?
Was it Kik?
No, it was another one. At least it was in Bosnian circles. I can't remember.
Okay, so believe it or not, I'm not Bosnian.
Yeah, you should have.
But I feel you, my brother. I feel you.
Exactly. Like what's Bosnia? Probably everybody is like.
No, I mean, I think that's you'll see these trends in the space, which is why I try to be as much of a practitioner as an analyst, which is why I think Extra Founder is the perfect company for me to be.
Viber. Whatever.
I want to say I remember that, but at that time there were a lot of messaging apps because messaging as a category was super duper.
Yeah.
And I think that that's even weird because you can be right around the thesis, right? Like you can say, in 5 years from now, 10 years from now, people are not going to have cars and they're going to have a ride sharing service, but is it Uber?
Or they can just teleport.
Look, hey, look, we can't tell them. We got to, we're working on that off camera. But yeah, no, like, you might be right around the category. Messaging is a big deal, right? Fintech is a big deal, but like, what team are you betting on? Like Uber and Lyft on paper could be the same company, but it comes down to what's the culture like at these places? Who was the founder? What kind of energy? What's their vision for it? Even if it's the same product. I know specifically as a marketer and as a creative, there's certain nuances in a brand that can't necessarily be quantified, but are just a part of that experience that makes somebody like you. Right?
Imagine somebody comes up with teleporting. How many businesses will be destroyed immediately? Like UPS, all the transportations.
Look, this is where I might have the hate mail here. I almost hesitate to say this, but I don't feel bad for that, right? Because it is like, think about when the car came around, all those people who were selling horses, right? It's not, as long as the human themselves is okay. I think it's a very unique thing. And I just picked this up with talking to people from all over the world. Americans define themselves by their job like crazy, right? Like I am a developer. Like I am a, it's like, no, you're human. And right now you're developing, but you could also write a book. You could also, there are so many things that the human can do. Like we are extremely resilient. But if teleportation were to happen, we're here. Like, the economy should be reflective of where we are instead of
Well,
us trying to like, I'm not gonna take a cab just to support small businesses if teleportation is here.
That's true. I think it all depends how quickly the change happens. Like if there's enough time
Aliens
to adapt,
come tomorrow and say, hey, here's a teleportation device.
exactly.
Everybody gets one.
That's it. I think what would happen, it would destroy this planet. There would be a war happening because it would be such a major shift that I don't think our society would be able to handle it. Imagine like you have this teleportation device, and let's say the aliens even make even bigger things. Like, you know what? We're just gonna give it to everybody. Okay.
Yeah.
First of all, you're gonna have people teleporting in your bathroom. Like what the hell is all that?
Why does somebody want to see you in your bathroom?
Because they were drunk. They dialed the wrong place. Ended up in your bathroom.
So okay, it's a dialing. You dial your teleportation in. What do you?
You missed the coordinates of somebody.
Right.
Somebody could teleport inside you. Like,
dude,
you don't know.
Could you imagine that? Just like you having a teleportation gun, but you just cannot drive. Like,
I mean, this is like it's like exactly like drunk teleporting. I mean, there's so many things you can go with that.
But then I would also see, while that's true, I mean, just knowing humans, we would make games out of it, right? Like we would try to have like sports to see who the best teleporters are. Like there would be teleportation Olympics. Like there's so much.
Well, right? It depends. Like, would the teleporting be limited to a certain distance, right? Or is it like how far can you go? Like where does it go? Like
right. So okay, if aliens come here, then obviously they're not coming from Earth. So let's assume that the world is bigger than Earth or the universe. But then, I mean, I think that is the scary part around like major shifts, right? One of the reasons I wanted to start this podcast is I think that the internet is one of those major shifting things, right? Like electricity changed everything, right?
Exactly.
Internet changed. Like there were revolts. I remember when Facebook was really starting to open up globally, there were national revolts because now people could communicate in ways that we now take for granted, right? Like people, in war would stop communications, right? And have you in the dark. So now if I can talk to somebody, you and I are in different states and we're just kind of kicking it right now, right?
Yeah, we haven't never met in person yet.
We've never met in person. Yeah. And you're a brother to me, Faruk.
Yeah, and I feel the same way. And it's like crazy. I mean, like we have a company now, we're running things. So it's interesting. Yeah, that's kind of where it's all going, and then the next day we're going to be teleporting somewhere,
No. I mean, I think that teleportation would be obviously one of those drastic shifts, but the idea of if you would have talked about the internet to somebody in the 40s or the 50s, if they came home from World War I or came home from World War II, and you're saying that, hey, look, this is a selfie. Like they would have been like, what the you
I mean, I wonder how far would it go? Like, would you even bother like chewing food? You could just teleport it into your stomach, right? Like
I used to jokes aside. So first of all, everyone should go and check a movie called Soylent Green. Soylent. Yeah. It's an interesting movie. Yeah. But when I was in college, I used to be upset at my body because it would be hungry. And I'm like, dog, I'm in a creative vibe, right? Like I'm trying to crank out this report and I'm like, oh, fuck, it is 4:00. I have not eaten all day. Like, why won't my stomach shut up? So, I play with the idea of the whole Soylent thing or the superfoods or the new nutrition capsules when I was, 19, 20, 21. You get a little older. I really enjoy the food. I think for me, because I spend so much time online, I have to pry myself away from the computer and just like sit and have a meal with no screen. But I would definitely assume that there's a demand for more caffeine, right? More filling foods. Dude, you're talking about if that were to happen, if you could just transport food or have food capsules or whatever, then, GMO, that conversation goes out the door. World hunger, right? Like that's kind of a big thing.
Yeah, I mean, if you have transportation, that means you're materializing things. You're dematerializing, materializing, and if you have that kind of capability, then you can obviously just create anything you want, right? It kind of goes in hands. You can't have that without, at least some kind of, what do they call it in Star Trek?
No, someone blew my mind because everything that we know about physics, right, is based in our reality. So, do the rules of earthly physics apply if you're on another if you're on another planet, and they
Well,
wouldn't.
it does, yeah.
Well, relativity, right, is a great example of why, an hour here or what density is here. I don't know. It doesn't line up. And then for me, we're humans. Like in my opinion, my definition of a human is, or not even definition, but one of the characteristics is, you tweeted this. We have supercomputers on our necks. Like, we're supporting supercomputers, and we are going to try to make sense of some shit, right?
Yeah.
So the idea of a number is a very intangible thing, and we're trying to explain something that exists outside of us. We're like, okay, that is one, and we make these formulas, we have these principles, we have these laws, right? That have never, if it's a law, if it's scientific law, it has not been disproven on this planet. But what happens if, it's so much beyond our realm of comprehension. I only brought that up to say, when you were saying that for a teleportation device to exist, it has to dematerialize and then rematerialize.
Yeah.
Based on earthly physics.
Well,
But if these guys fucking come in and just say all that shit is dumb, y'all are cavemen, y'all are monkeys 20,000 years ago.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I think the physics is, from what we can tell, very similar everywhere else from wherever we peered with our telescope.
And I'm not a physicist, so I'm just shooting the shit here.
Now there might be like different things that we haven't seen yet, right? That's behaving differently in another. Like, there might be another universe where physics are totally different. But so far, what we can peer with our telescope seems like it's all behaving similarly, right?
Yep.
So I would imagine that, and that's why they say, actually, like, and that's kind of what they say in Star Trek. If you watch Star Trek, why are everybody looking humanoid, right?
Right.
Obviously, it's easier to shoot
fathom.
them.
To
shoot it. It's really because of the cost, right? But they also, some people, I've read some articles that they said that maybe humans are at its optimal. Think about it, right? Having two legs, right?
Dog, do you see Twitter? I refuse to believe that we're at peak optimal form.
Well, no, I'm saying it's
girls are gluing butts on the back. You're in Miami, you're in Florida, like, this is happening. One of the I remember a few years ago, there was an article, I think it was a Time magazine cover, and they were just saying the future of the humanoid, right? And we had larger eyes. We basically look like little green men in all of the alien films, because it was like, okay, you don't walk anymore, right? You have this robo butler who picks you up, so your leg muscles shrink, right? And we're bipeds, right? I think I'm saying that right, bipeds. Because we had to walk. While I was in school, I'm gonna tell I cannot wait to have grandkids and tell them, when I was your age, I walked to the school, I walked back. It was 5 miles each way, up and down the hill, right? But I don't have any children. My unborn child may or may not ever have to have a driver's license if Elon Musk hurries up and gets this self-driving car.
Yeah, maybe. Or who knows? The way we're going, we might even leave a worse future for them, like, with tornadoes, earthquakes, global warming.
That's fair. I think that I've been in the media for a little while before, right? If it bleeds, it leads. I think that if getting our information from people who make it their job to tell you need to be worried about this tonight at 7, cocaine crackers, this is what your kids are be on the lookout, do your kids so like I think from my perspective, and I could be wrong, we're advancing as a civilization, right? Like, the statistics show, right, what's happening. I think the biggest threat, in my opinion, to humanity is the separation, the haves and the have-nots, especially as this internet thing becomes.
I mean, we are advancing, but at cost of what, right? So that's kind of what the global warming and scientists are saying. And this is not like, obviously.
I'm trying to cop a Cybertruck, by the way. Go ahead.
I mean, the news, obviously, they like everything is glamorized and magnified, but there's still truths behind all of these things, right?
Absolutely.
It's like global warming and things like that. It's happening, and
that's what I'm saying.
Kind of what I'm worried about.
That in 2020, we're in a better position for global warming than we were when we were 100% oil dependent, right? Like in 1970,
we had we had more time at that point.
Right.
Just
I
correct
see what you're
it.
saying. I see
We
what you're
might be
saying.
too
So
late
we're
right now.
doing better, but it might be too late to do better.
Exactly. Like
Okay.
we
Yeah.
like the ship is already
Right.
Titanic is already scraping against the
I mean, but
the
this goes back to
iceberg.
what we said around adversity with founders, right? Like, I think that adversity as a species, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, COVID definitely showed its ass, and I saw that this is not always true. But I would hope that when shit gets real, then humans come together regardless of sex, race, age, da da da. I'm telling you, if aliens came in this motherfucker right now and was like, y'all all humans, y'all work for us, I swear, if any human does not have my back the way that I have their back, then we're not thinking about this the right way. And
Well,
I
I
think
mean,
the conversation now, especially with global warming, is people is denying. Like, people like, it doesn't exist. So we can't even agree on what
well,
the threat is.
you know what it is? It's you sense like you don't have to really imagine what would happen with aliens. You just have to look at our history. Look, in extreme situations during wars, right?
Right.
Like I told you, I've been in a war, and it's what extreme situations do. They just make everything more extreme. So
Right.
the bad people are just going to be bad. Good people are going to be good. So it's
Right.
not going to like make everybody good all of a sudden.
Right.
It's just you'll probably have a bunch of people deserting, going, helping aliens to to screw over a bunch of humans.
No,
right?
I can see that. I can say, hey, look, I'll help y'all if y'all don't kill me. No, man, I gotta go out like a G. I have to.
I got a bunch of virgins over here. I'll sacrifice them all for you.
Right.
Or
Look,
whatever it is.
Look, we're getting ready to wrap this podcast up shortly, but before we do, I didn't even think this. Like, I genuinely believe that every human deep down inside wants to be good, right? I think that circumstance is a motherfucker. I think that if you have been hurt people, right? If you feel as though I was listening to a Jay-Z song yesterday. Some, but it's not fair. I break the rules, so I don't care. Right? If you feel as though it is not beneficial to you to even do the right thing, you might give up on it. I think there are some people who would consider themselves as realists. They're like, look, man, all of this shit, like, I would want to do all that, but the reality of the situation is it's fucked up. I gotta do what I gotta do. And I think that goes down a bunch of rabbit holes there. But yeah, man, I don't think that people are born evil per se.
I mean, no, I think
Like,
some people
get real fucked up when you add in ego and like pride and shame and
I mean, they might not be evil, but and an evil is just such a big word. But I think that what a lot of people, they're not evil, they just care less, and they're more selfish for their reasoning.
Yep.
And then maybe they might not go out of the way to just burn everything to crisp, right? But they won't think twice about maybe running over a few people or
I think
or even more.
I think that yeah, for sure. And I don't disagree with that. I would say that I would assume there's a reason. Like, I don't think that it's their nature is that. I think that it's like circumstance to where I went through a phase in my life where I was like, I was well aware that if I was to die, then the world would keep fucking going. Right. So then I'm like, okay, nobody owes me anything. So it just flipped a switch in my mind, and I've just been working like a fucking insane person ever since, because I'm like, well, let me take care of myself. Let me take care of my blah, blah, blah. But I could have easily went the other way and said, look, if my life is not worth anything to people, maybe I would have saw myself as worthless, right? Maybe I would have said, hey, I don't have shit to lose. Fuck it. I'm getting ready to rob people, right? But I was on the other side of that decision. But I'm saying that I think that there would be a reason why someone would even get to that point, because, I just grew up in environments where it's a lot of hopelessness, where it's a lot of people who be like, man, like, you can be a good person. All that goody two-shoe shit, man, that shit, you can try to get a job. You can try to go to school. Why? You're going to end up broke anyway. Like, people don't believe that they can work hard and be a billionaire, right? Like, that's why you see so much of these revolts in the street now is people feel like the game is so rigged against them, capitalism being the game that I'm referring to, that they don't even want to try. They're just like, you're not going to get me on these slave wages.
Yeah, I don't think there's really capitalism or socialism. It's really just like big mush of things. Like, people like to label these things,
for sure.
But like, they all really like have some manifestations of each other in them, right? Like, I came from first was a communist country, then socialist, and now I'm in a capitalist country. So I've been through that whole, right? And it's like, you see in all of them corruptions. You
Yep.
see in all of
for
them people helping socially as well, right? So there's social aspects in all of them. There's communist aspect and there's capitalism aspects in all of them. It's like, it's just humans are that way, right? And it just depends. Like, no matter how much somebody's trying to box you into one of these ideologies, the humanity of it bleeds out and starts reforming it.
Nah, thank God for that, man. I think that's a good note to wrap up the show on, because I was getting ready to go down on like all these things are.
We don't want to put people to sleep.
Yeah. No, definitely. So if you made it this far, we appreciate you. You've made it through another episode of Thank God for Internet. You've been your host, Chris and Faruk, and we look forward to having you check in on the next episode. Y'all stay up.
Wake up right now.
Hey,
you're not dreaming. All right, have a good one, guys.
That's a wrap.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Thank God for Internet. If you enjoyed today's show, be sure to show your support by subscribing and leaving an honest review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, or wherever you're listening right now. For more great content, head over to extrafounder.com. Thank you, and catch you on the next episode.